You ever come home after a long, stressful day, just wanting to pull into your driveway and find a bright yellow Lamborghini blocking the entire entrance like it owns the place? Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me. But it wasn't just any random car, and it definitely wasn't a mistake. This was the doing of Karen, our HOA president, who thought her new luxury toy deserved VIP parking right in front of my garage. She claimed it was just temporary while she ran inside. But that was hours ago. And this isn't the first time she's pulled something like this. Karen's been a thorn in everyone's side in this neighborhood for years. From fining people for leaving their trash cans out for 5 extra minutes, to measuring grass height with a ruler. She's the kind of person who lives to control others. But this, blocking my driveway with her Lambo like she owns my property, that crossed a line, and what she didn't know was I had something in my garage that wasn't just for show. A fully operational armored tank, retired from military service, legally owned and parked under my roof. Now, before anyone freaks out, no, I didn't lose my mind or go full-blown crazy. But I had reached my limit. After trying to call her, knock on her door, even contacting the HOA board, nothing worked. It was like she was daring me to do something about it. And trust me, I did. What happened next? Let's just say it wasn't the reaction Karen or the rest of the neighborhood was expecting. The sound of metal meeting steel, the gasps, the chaos. All of it unfolded in a way no one saw coming. But here's the thing, it wasn't just about a car. This was about standing up to someone who thought rules didn't apply to her. And believe me, what came next? You'll want to stick around for that, to really understand how things got to this point. You need to know a bit about the history between me and Karen. She moved into the neighborhood about 2 years ago, and within a month, somehow got herself elected as the HOA president. Nobody really voted. It was one of those meetings where only 3 people showed up, and boom, Karen was in charge. Ever since, she's treated this community like her personal kingdom. She'd walk around with a clipboard, snapping pictures of porch lights that didn't match HOA guidelines, or writing up infractions for mailboxes being the wrong shade of black. I tried to keep my distance from the drama, but she made that impossible. She'll fine me once for having a garden hose coiled up on the side of my house. Another time, she left a notice on my door because the flag I hung wasn't properly centered. Petty stuff, but I let it slide. I figured she'd eventually calm down or get voted out. Instead, she just got worse and bolder. Then came the Lamborghini. Brand new custom plates, loud as anything. She started parking it in front of other people's houses just to show off. But when she blocked my driveway, it was clearly deliberate. Especially since she had her own garage and 2 empty guest spots right across the street. I knew it was personal. Maybe she didn't like how I ignored her little warnings. Maybe it was because I spoke up in the last HOA meeting when she tried to fine an elderly neighbor for planting sunflowers. Whatever her reason, Karen thought I'd roll over. What she didn't count on was what I had parked just feet away from her precious car. And no, this wasn't some childish stunt. It was a message, a loud one. And when I finally opened that garage door, the entire block stopped what they were doing. Everything changed after that, as the garage door lifted and the front end of my armored vehicle came into view. I could feel the shift in energy on the street. Neighbors stopped mid-step. A kid dropped his basketball. Even Mr. Peterson, who never comes outside, was peeking through his blinds. I hadn't even started the engine yet, but the tension was thick. I wasn't trying to scare anyone. I just wanted my driveway back. But with Karen, nothing is ever that simple. The tank wasn't just a showpiece. It was fully restored, street legal, insured, and part of a veteran memorial program I'd volunteered for. I'd kept it under wraps, mostly because I didn't want attention. But now, it was the only language Karen seemed to understand. Still, I hesitated. I didn't want drama, I wanted a solution. But before I could even act, here she came, stomping down the sidewalk in stilettos. Phone in hand, recording like she was about to expose me. "What do you think you're doing?" she yelled, pointing the camera at my face. "This is an act of aggression. I'll have you removed from this neighborhood." I calmly asked her to move her car. Again, told her this was her last chance before things escalated. She just laughed, called it a glorified toy, and dared me to do something. Meanwhile, neighbors started whispering. Some filmed from their porches. Others nodded at me, silently cheering me on. That's when I realized this wasn't just about my driveway anymore. People were tired. Karen's rules, her fines, her ego, she'd been terrorizing the whole neighborhood. One mom came up and quietly told me Karen had threatened to report her to CPS over a Halloween decoration. Another guy said Karen tried to have his dog banned because it barked at her once. Suddenly, my standoff wasn't just mine. It was everyone's. But as the engine roared to life and Karen's face turned pale for the first time, I knew there was no going back. The line had been drawn, and something big was about to happen. The moment I climbed into the tank and pulled the hatch shut, a hush fell over the block. The rumble of the engine echoed off the houses like distant thunder. Karen was still standing in the middle of my driveway, yelling into her phone, claiming she was being attacked by military-grade equipment and demanding someone call the HOA emergency line, but no one was moving. No one was calling anyone. They were watching, waiting, holding their breath. Through the armored window, I could see her pacing in front of her Lamborghini, arms flailing. She wasn't moving it, not an inch. Instead, she doubled down, screaming that I was trespassing on common HOA property, and that her car had more value than my entire house. The words barely registered. My focus was locked in, heart pounding, hands gripping the controls. It wasn't about revenge. It was about standing my ground. Literally, neighbors began gathering along the sidewalks. Some with lawn chairs, others with snacks like it was a full-on neighborhood event. Kids whispered in excitement while adults tried to act casual, phones recording everything. Nobody stepped in. Not even the HOA board members who lived just 2 houses down. They stood at the edge of their driveway, watching silently. It felt like the entire community had reached its boiling point. Tan Karen, with her smug attitude and flashy Lambo, was the match. I inched the tank forward, just a few feet, enough to make a point. The sound of the treads grinding across the pavement made Karen jump. She stumbled backward and nearly dropped her phone. But still, she refused to move. Instead, she parked herself between the tank and the car, claiming she'd file charges. If I came even 1 inch closer, the tension was unbearable. Everyone was watching. No one knew what I'd do next. And to be honest, neither did I. All I knew was this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about putting an end to her HOA reign for good. Just when I thought things couldn't get more out of control, a sleek black SUV rolled up and parked right behind the crowd of neighbors. The doors opened, and out stepped 2 men in matching suits, clipboard in hand, badges around their necks. At first glance, I thought they were cops. Maybe HOA security or city officials Karen had called in. But as they approached, I noticed the lettering on their gear: Private HOA Compliance Enforcement. That's right, Karen had hired a private enforcement firm to back her up, like she was some kind of dictator running a gated empire. The taller guy motioned for me to exit the tank, saying they were conducting an emergency compliance check. I didn't budge. I told them calmly that this was private property, and the vehicle was legally registered and parked in my own driveway. The shorter one muttered something into a walkie-talkie, then tried to hand me a citations, something about unauthorized military-grade machinery within HOA limits. I almost laughed. Karen stood off to the side, arms folded, smirking like she'd just played her trump card. But that's when things took an unexpected turn. Mrs. Chen from across the street, who never gets involved in anything, marched straight up to the enforcement guys and demanded to see their credentials. Turns out she's a retired attorney, and what she spotted next changed everything. The so-called enforcement officers weren't officially recognized by any city authority. Okay, they were contractors hired by Karen using HOA funds without board approval. You could feel the crowd shift again. The whispers turned louder. The tension wasn't just about me and Karen anymore. It had officially cracked wide open. Now the neighbors weren't just bystanders. They started asking questions. Where was the money coming from? Who gave Karen the authority? What else had she done behind closed doors? The focus was changing and fast. But while Karen was distracted with damage control, I was still in the tank, and her Lambo was still blocking my driveway, and I had one more move to make. With Karen scrambling to explain how she hired a private enforcement team using HOA funds, the mood on the block shifted from tension to outrage. Neighbors who had stayed quiet for years were suddenly speaking up one by one. They started sharing stories about shady fines, threats of lien notices, and secret HOA meetings no one was told about. The enforcement guys, clearly realizing they were in over their heads, backed off and quietly left, leaving Karen standing there, losing control. By the second, inside the tank, I took a breath. The moment had come. I inched forward again, slow and steady, the treads grinding closer to her Lamborghini. The crowd hushed. Karen whipped around, holding up her hand like she could stop a 30-ton vehicle with her palm. "You wouldn't dare," she screamed, but this time no one came to her defense. Her power gone, her control shattered. Then, just feet from the car, I stopped. Not because I was backing down, but because I had already made my point. The tank wasn't the weapon, truth was. Karen turned toward me, now visibly shaken, as I climbed down from the hatch. I walked up to her and calmly said, "You've blocked more than just my driveway. You've blocked this whole neighborhood from being a community." At that exact moment, a local news van rolled up. Apparently, someone had tipped them off. Cameras rolled as neighbors surrounded Karen, demanding an emergency HOA meeting. Some even called for a full audit. She tried to walk away, but the crowd followed, and for the first time, Karen had nowhere to hide. But just when we thought it was all over, the twist hit. The HOA treasurer, quiet, soft-spoken guy named Leo, stepped forward and dropped a bomb. "I've been keeping records," he said, "and I have proof Karen's been using HOA money to fund her luxury upgrades, including that Lamborghini." Karen's face went pale. The crowd erupted. And just like that, the story wasn't about a driveway anymore. It had become something much bigger. Something that might just change the neighborhood forever. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. After Leo came forward with the financial records, the HOA board had no choice but to launch a full investigation. The numbers didn't lie. Thousands of dollars were unaccounted for, with receipts tracing back to personal upgrades for Karen landscaping she claimed was community beautification, but clearly done on her property, expensive security, systems that only covered her house, and yes, payments tied to the lease of that bright yellow Lamborghini. At the emergency HOA meeting, held in the community center instead of Karen's living room, for the first time, the neighborhood voted to remove her as president. It wasn't even close. She tried to argue, to spin it like she was being targeted unfairly, but no one was buying it anymore. Even her closest allies on the board quietly stepped down, realizing the damage had been done. The Lambo repossessed within a month. Apparently, once the HOA stopped footing the bill, the company came calling. Karen moved out not long after, her once intimidating presence reduced to awkward glances and late-night moving trucks. The block felt lighter after she left, like we could all finally breathe again. As for the tank, I never had to move it beyond that moment. Just the sight of it was enough to start a movement. Now it sits in my garage, covered and quiet. A reminder of the day the community stood up for itself. Neighbors talk to each other now. There's a real sense of trust again. We even had our first block party in years. No fines. No rules about QE-lees. No rules about QE-lees. Rules about decorations or grass height. Just people being neighbors. The biggest lesson. Sometimes it takes one bold stand to shake loose years of control. And sometimes standing your ground in your own driveway is exactly where change begins.